Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. Today we welcome back special guest Maestro David Dworkin, who has led orchestras across America and abroad and has performed around the world. Maestro David is a graduate of the Juilliard School and Columbia University Teachers College. He began his career as a clarinetist, and much of his career has been devoted to working with young people and older adults. Today, he's combining his lifelong passion for conducting, performing, educating, and physical fitness through his award-winning Conductorcise.
Well, welcome, everybody. Danielle, how are you today?
I'm doing great. We have one of my favorite people on the show.
Oh, yeah, he is. Teresa can't join us today. She's off. But we do have, drum roll, Maestro David Dworkin with us again. Some of you may know he recorded a couple podcast episodes with us some months ago. Which were highly successful. And, given his history and everything, I think it was inevitable you were going to be back with us, David. Welcome.
I'm honored and excited to be here and share my passion for life.
That's the overriding thing, isn't it? And we feel it when we're with you. It's just got, even virtually, you feel the vibrations. David, I know you know this, but I'm going to review it for our listeners. That masterpiece, which Danielle and I spend most of our time, we've been developing content, and some of that content is for senior living communities and other organizations. And the one we've been working on is Unearthing cultural, and that basically means we're looking at wellness across the world in different cultures and different countries. And part of that, which is going to be an off-the-shelf thing that a community can use. And so there's so much to culture, as you know. We had to focus on something to start out with, so we focused on dance. We drilled down into dance and 3 or 4 areas: New Zealand, Philippines, and the West African dance. That's right. Yeah, that's what you did, in particular, Danielle. And then it was so clear to us that, dance and music are very much together. Do you know that, in fact, in the Sesotho language, which is a Bantu language, there's only one word for singing and dancing? They're very much related: dancing, singing, and music. And so you came to mind. So we said, we got to get David on here to talk about the effects of music, because music is part of the experience that you're going to have when you're dancing. And probably more so than if you're just sitting in a seat listening to music, So that's what drew us back to you, David. Also, besides, you're just a great guy, and you make us better and feel good about life, especially in these very tough times. And so again, we're so very happy to have you. David, I think many people know about you, but and we read an introduction at the beginning of this, but how about from your perspective, sort of a thumbnail or even a little more? So David, could you give us sort of a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of your magnificent, eclectic, exciting, adventurous background?
Well, Of course, I'll look back at almost 88 years in July, and I've really been blessed with energy and passion for music. Um, Early days, music was not on the bucket list. Through school, there was an introduction to music that I loved through one of my teachers. In high school, all I did was tell jokes and play tennis up until the clarinet hit me through a friend. And I was fortunate to get to an unbelievable teacher, mentor, became a friend, a colleague, Ben Armato, and he set me on the road to practicing many, many hours a day. And I was accepted into the Juilliard School of Music. I was 17, just 17. My birthday's in July. I was 16 when I graduated. And I was so green and knew nothing, and have learned a little bit more. When I graduated Juilliard, I did go to Columbia for Masters in Music and Music Education, just in case. But I was fortunate again. Ben Amato was a member of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and through an introduction and auditions, I became what was called a steady extra. And my first performance was in 1960, and my last performances was in 2005-06. So you can see that I was there for many years, and it was really a tremendous experience, Metropolitan Opera. I also was very fortunate to play first clarinet under Leopold Stokowski in the American Symphony. I played chamber music concerts, blah, blah, blah. I also had a parallel
Blah 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 is
blah blah blah. But there is a lot. There is a lot in between, and you don't want to hear all of that because it would be too much. But I again fell in love with conducting. I took some conducting courses in Juilliard and followed them up in graduate work. And conducting is a completely different experience, and it allowed you to get into the music even more deeply than just the performance end and playing and sitting in a chair and playing, which is wonderful. So I was again fortunate in getting a position with the Manhattan School of Music Preparatory Division, unbelievably talented students for almost a dozen years. I was conductor of the Vermont Symphony for 7 years, the Vermont Symphony Youth Orchestra as well. So New Jersey Symphony had experience in conducting in different parts of the world. And, I mentioned this to you before. I was just thinking this. The word alive is an adjective, and worth 10 points in Scrabble. But I consider it alive to me is a verb, because alive means movement and motion. And looking back and preparing for this podcast, bottom line, motion and movement is what has stimulated not only my body, but my brain. I didn't know that. When you conduct, you are not thinking about what's going on in your brain for health reasons. But it is a fact, and this is where I usually fall on the floor. It is a fact that conductors are said to live long and interesting lives for sure, but that there are many conductors that have lived many years, and there are books written on this. And it all has to do with motion and movement. It's the most natural thing in the world. So there you go in a nutshell, my music background. But music is part of me, and motion is part of me. That's why they always said, Dworkin, sit still in your seat when I was in the 8th grade. I'm always moving.
Roger, I know we have a whole bunch of questions for David, but it just made me think when you were talking about approaching music in a different way as a conductor, you always see little kids when they watch like Bugs Bunny and they make pretend like all you do is move your hands back and forth. Can you tell us a little bit about what those movements mean to the people that you're conducting?
Sure. First of all, there were not always conductors. People kept time. Back in the 17th century, Baroque music, there was a famous composer named Jean-Baptiste Lully, who died at the end of the 1600s, 1672 or something like that. And there's the famous story that he was keeping time with a stick, like a cane, beating time. No conductor, but just beating time. Accidentally, he hit his toe. An infection set in. He got gangrene and died. So it's dangerous then to be a conductor. But as music became more complicated, larger orchestras, you did need somebody up front to be the boss. And what those motions you're talking about is, obviously you cannot talk when you're conducting. It's all body language, which is really very important, and signals. Signals, just like in baseball and in football and in whatever, there are signals. And there are patterns for 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and more complicated rhythms. Do the conductors always stick to those patterns? No, but they're basic. This is what you learn. This is part of your skills. Just like any other profession, the conductor has to have basic skills, the listening skills. You've heard in tune. Well, sure. You hear the oboe give what's called an A. That's 440 vibrations a second creates an A. If anything vibrates 440 times a second, it's an A. Some orchestras, the Boston Symphony used to tune to 443 or 4, which made it sharper, a little bit more brilliant, but that's what the conductor wanted. But most today, 440. And in tune, an orchestra's core, I believe, is being in tune. That's physically in tune, mathematically in tune, but also an orchestra has to be in tune with each other. This is a group of people, 60, 70, 80. It depends on the size of the orchestra. I know questions come into play about, do you need a conductor? And the answer is no, you don't always need a conductor, because if you're playing the Stars and Stripes Forever with the New York Philharmonic, they can play it by themselves. However, when Leonard Bernstein conducts the Stars and Stripes, it's different than conductor X. There's something else, that communication between that person and the orchestra, that makes the difference between great and sometimes mediocre or just good. And those signals allow the players to see where you are. There's also, pointing, alerting, that's called cueing, alerting the first clarinet player, hey, you got a solo coming up, and he looks in his eyes and boom, that's when you play, which is very nice. I once played an opera under Herbert von Karajan, who fantastic conductor, but he goes a downbeat and then he goes to sleep for about 3 hours in the opera. He closes his eyes. He doesn't give cues. He's still a great conductor because at rehearsal, he's telling things and making one feel. So he figures at performance, you're going to know everything. You don't have to have a special cue to get you in. You're going to be there. And if it wasn't for a good knock on my right hand from my friend Ben Armato, who is next to me now, I probably would have missed that. Anyhow, that's the story with conductors. They need basic tools, and then it goes from there.
That's fascinating stuff, isn't it, Danielle? I'm glad you asked that, because
but you see how I moved.
Oh
And
yeah, even while he was answering folk
it's a
listening, he's
natural thing to move. And of course, conducting, that's why Conductorcise, it was born out of understanding that the conductor moves, and at the end of the performance, if if in 99% of the performances, he or she should be sweating, just like exercise. And not only that, you're high as a kite. And that's because of those endorphins that are being released and cortisol levels going down and dopamine. You don't think of that when you're finished with the Beethoven Fifth Symphony, but that's what's happening. I learned over so many years through beautiful people like Roger or Dr. John Rady or Connie Tomeno, who is the director of the Institute of Music and Neurologic Function in Mount Vernon, New York, where Oliver Sacks did much of his work.
So tell us, let's talk a little bit about Conductorcise, because I think that's that's so related to what we were doing with this cultural wellness thing and the dance and music and things. So in case you don't know, Conductorcise, basically the maestro here is conducting an orchestra of conductors. He plays music, and they each have a baton of some sort, could be anything, and he leads them through that, and they are moving as if they were conductors, and the maestro is leading. So you must see a lot of very fascinating things happen to the people. You just alluded to some of it. And you know, what else do you see?
Okay, so as you stated in the beginning, dance and music, they're one. They're really one, and both those art forms transcend language. I was in Holland, one of my favorite places in the world. I was there 3 times presenting for venues, just like in this country, senior residences. And they, most, because older people, obviously, they did not speak English. I had an interpreter, but it was pretty hard for him to keep up with me. But you know what? In 2 minutes, they got it. Everyone in the audience was moving and smiling and laughing, and that's the point of Conductorcise. I was in Holland, and I did a presentation for an audience of not only independent, but independent through memory care. Now, I never care for whom I'm presenting. In fact, it's good not to know, because it's not much different when I present for an Alzheimer group or an independent group. It's still music and how it gets to one inside. It may be different levels, but music pervades inside everybody. Part of our DNA, I believe. Not I believe. That's what Connie Tomeno told us. So I'll get back to that. But here I am conducting a waltz by Johann Strauss, and 2 ladies in the front row get up spontaneously and start to dance. They dance through, they do a little waltz in front of everybody, uninhibited, and sit down. After the staff member said, these people all have Alzheimer's, and these particular gals have not moved in months. And boom, there it was. So music stimulates the physical. One other very beautiful memory is I always get to a place early. I like to warm up the room, and if anybody comes into the room, they get a bonus because I'm talking to them about what I'm going to be doing, and I'm jumping around trying to warm up. So a gal comes in. When I say a gal comes in, she's probably 90 years old with a very sad face, and sits down. And I go over to her and I said, is everything okay? I hope you're going to enjoy the program. And she said, my partner just was put into the Alzheimer's building. My partner. uh, and I want to cry. I'm very sad. I miss him. I said, well, look, I just sit, try and enjoy the program, and I'll talk to you afterwards, which I did. And what she told me was, in this hour, because the program lasts approximately an hour, I didn't think of John at all. Uh, I was so involved in the music and just moving my body around, and this can be done chair-bound or standing, and many of my audiences are chair-bound. It was such a wonderful little break for me. Uh, and so that affects the mind. And how many people have come up to me and said, oh, boy, did we need that? Meaning they're in a dark place a lot of times, and this just makes life worth living that day. You're smiling, you're not thinking of anything, you're having a great time. Music, motion, mobility. There you go. That's it.
You said I wanted to. So, Doc Roger, I wanted to look smart for this podcast. So I actually did a little research on music and the brain, and I learned something. And you just said it with your two examples. You mentioned the two women who had dementia, but they could dance. Well, in the cerebellum, we never lose muscle memory. So if you danced as a kid, if you played music as a kid, it's going to come back, which is how they could do that. And you talk about the woman, it's pure mindfulness, because you're giving the default mode network something to do rather than focusing on grief. Plus, you already mentioned the dopamine rush you get just from the movement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure you all know that music is, from what I'm told, the last thing that goes in memory, and within music, rhythm. And that gets to what we might be saying about Parkinson's.
And speaking of rhythm, is another part of the brain, the putamen it's called, and this has to do with rhythm and body movement. And this is affected by Parkinson's. And when music is played, it stimulates this area and it releases dopamine. And so the people with Parkinson's who otherwise can't move very well can start to move perfectly fine when they're listening to the music. You shut off the music, they're back to being Parkinson's. It's unfortunate it can't stay longer than that, but it's like a miracle. And the list goes on and on. It decreases depression, increases the immune system, decreases stress, it increases your cognitive skill. It just goes on and on and on. And with that, rhythm and dancing, it's you got a magic potion there, man. It's working for you as well as everybody else.
Well, I do think it is. I mean, I do attribute my longevity. Also, I mentioned this before. Longevity is a gift, I guess. It's a little good fortune and a little good genes and a little what you put into your body. What are you feeding your body? That's the old story. Would you put that into a car? Would you feed that kind of stuff into a car? No, you want the best kind of fuel for your body and your brain. And topping the list, and I said it before, topping the list from as far back as I can remember, it's moving and mobility. I got on a bike when I was 5 or 6 years old. I remember that. I remember my sister taught me how to ride a bike in the summer, a little blue greasy bike, and I remember that. And I've been biking ever since. I'm biking yesterday, and I'm going to go out today. I try to do it every day, winter or summer, spring or fall. But that's me. But people can move, and you don't need to do a marathon, and you don't have to ride a bike from California to Maine. You can walk up and down your halls. You can feel strength by some resistance working, if you wish, but if you can move. And of course, Conductorcise helps you to do that without your thinking. It's one of the programs that you cannot do anything wrong. There are no list of instructions of what you have to do other than move. And with that, I will say some people come into the room with a really fierce look on their face saying, I am not going to participate. I want to know
Yeah.
Give them 3 minutes of music, and I don't know whether this is the time to show you that kind of music, but give them something that they can't help. You see the foot starts to tap, and a smile comes to the face, and all of a sudden, blah, blah, blah.
Now's a perfect time. We want to hear it.
Well, I have a group, a few seconds of each. This is something by Malcolm Arnold. It's called Solitaire Polka. It's not fast, but listen to the rhythm of it and the fun of it and see if it doesn't make you smile. Boom, boom. You hear that? That's a good kick in the pants at the end.
I was moving. I saw Danielle was also big smile.
You can't. And here's one called Die Puppenfeet. It's the fairy doll. It's ballet music. You talk about dance. Well, you're not going to have ballet. Yes, there is some ballet without dance. And going back a minute, there are orchestras without a conductor. One of the most famous is Orpheus in New York City. They're like a family, and they do beautiful work. But 99% of orchestras do have a conductor. So this is the Die Puppenfeet. Oh! Oh! How can you not move to that music? And this is a work that was performed before an audience of over 100,000. There they are. Woo! See, my insides are vibrating. They're vibrating. That is a communication with my audience. They start to feel what I feel when I move. They start to move. And it doesn't matter what the next guy is doing or the next gal. They're completely doing their own thing. No, people become uninhibited. They are not inhibited. I have two more very quick one. This is called a Kettentanz, and this is by Johann Strauss. I listen to this music, and I'm not playing Beethoven now or Mozart, but I could pick out Beethoven and Mozart, and it'd do the same thing to you. And you talk about cultural wellness. That's the other thing I try to do in the program. Tell you a little bit about the composer. They're not just Ludwig van Beethoven in the book. They are people. They had a life. They had sadness. They had joy. I want to bring that out. I talk about the time period because things have changed, right? Things have changed. Here's the last one. This is a fast polka by Johann Strauss Jr. brother, Joseph. So that's called In Flight. Well, that's what we try and do. We get people moving. And the whole point of the program, Roger, you said it before, is to allow the body to respond naturally to this movement, to the joy, and, doesn't hurt to smile. Smiling is great. Look at all those muscles around here that you're working. It goes on forever. And I guess I could talk forever too.
I'm thinking, also what we also found is that with dance, we did traditional dancers. And so there's an element of the people's history there. There's a story of their culture, and add that to everything else, and it just becomes a bonanza of health.
Uh, I got a story for that too. Back to Holland. The next day after one of the performances in the local paper that was shown to me, it said, Conductorcise makes a Holland man cry. Now, it it wasn't in a negative sense. It was tears of joy because this gentleman came up to me afterwards. He was in a wheelchair. Came up to me afterwards. He said, "The music you're playing reminds me of what my father played for me when I was a kid." And it just brought back such beautiful memories that I had to cry. And that tells it all, as well. I don't know whether this is the time or you're going to ask me a little later about the Alzheimer, and I have one story about that. One of the things I like to do at the end of a program, and there are two ways to end a program. One is traditional, when you do yoga or whatever, you cool down. You cool down. Many times I don't want to cool down. I don't want them to leave cooled down. I want them to leave activated. So when they leave the room, they feel energized and beauty in their heart, and a more friendly relationship with everything that's around them. Nicer, it makes you nicer. Larry David wouldn't agree, but I do believe it makes you nicer. So here I am, and I'm using "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" from Oklahoma. And I go back 1943, Oklahoma, the middle of the war, blah, blah, blah. All the stories that people during that time, and they remember because I'm with them. I was a kid at that time, but I was, so I was 9, 10 years old, 11, 12, before the war ended. And yeah, there were blackouts, and there was rationing, and there were gold stars on the window, all that. And I bring that in. And here's Rogers and Hammerstein, Oklahoma. And "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." So we do "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" to an Alzheimer's group. And the staff says, "Listen, this gal over here, she hasn't uttered a word in weeks. So don't worry about it." And I normally say to whomever, whether it's independent or right through memory care, if you don't remember the verse, the very beginning, don't worry about it. Comes the chorus. "Oh, what a beautiful morning." Just open your mouth and see what happens. So we get to that section, and from this lady, I hear, "Oh, what a beautiful," in a horrible voice, but every word clear and distinct. So and of course, on YouTube, you can see some beautiful examples of people working with dementia and Alzheimer's, and they, through music, bring back their memory. There it is.
I think we'll probably break there, but when we come back, we're going to talk about kids, right?
Wonderful. I love them. I was once a kid.
Conductorcise, led by Maestro David Dworkin, is a joyous physical exercise that uses the magic of world music and classical music to stimulate the brain and body through movement. It is a flexible and fun way to increase cardio strength, enhance well-being, and improve the mind, body, and spirit through improvisational movement, music, and listening in a way that makes one aware of the colors, motion, and dynamics of music. Learn more at Conductorcise.com. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.